Hello and thank you for joining me again. This is Taliesin McKnight, and today's topic is the High Priestess Tarot card. And today I'm going to talk about your everyday interpretation of the card in a reading. And I'll also get into the deeper esoteric and Qabalistic meaning of the card. So we're both going to get into how you would interpret the card in a reading, and we're also going to go into the deeper esoteric occult philosophy behind it. So the High Priestess, and there are many different versions of the card. This is one of the most popular decks. This is the Rider-Waite-Smith deck. This is the High Priestess card as it was developed by Arthur Edward Waite and painted by Pamela Colman Smith. And this is one of the most popular decks, and this is the deck that many people start with, and it's full of deeper esoteric symbolism. So that's the Rider-Waite deck. And many later decks were based on this image. And then there are many more, lots of different examples. What's interesting is that the High Priestess, as the name implies, High Priestess, you think of a female spiritual figure. She represents the divine feminine and feminine spirituality. And it's interesting because in older decks, when things were more influenced by Christian symbolism, she was called the Papess, the female pope. And many people speculate that her being called the Papess in older decks is a reference to Pope Joan, who was a legendary female pope. But yes, in older decks she was referred to as the Papess, the female pope. And here's an example. This is the Tarot of Marseille. Okay? This is the Tarot of Marseille. And it even says, okay, if you look at the top, it says in Italian, La Papessa. The female pope, La Papesse. Okay? So that's interesting. And then one more I'll show you. This is from the Oswald Worth deck, which is a more occult deck from French occult tarot. This takes the Tarot of Marseille, which is a French occult deck, and adapts it to the teachings of Eliphas Levi in his Transcendental Magic, another French occultist. And so this is the Oswald Worth deck, which is based on the Tarot of Marseille with corrections by Eliphas Levi. As you can see, it's more occult oriented. You see the yin-yang symbol. She holds the keys of St. Peter. Again, La Papesse. And as you can see, as a side note, in French occultism, she's ascribed the letter Beit instead of gimal. So, as I said in my last video on the Empress, I did a video on the Empress before this one, even though it comes after. I talked about how French occultism, like Eliphas Levi, Pappus, has a different attribution of the Hebrew letters, and that's an example. Here she's given as Beit, even though in here I'm going to talk about it as gimal. So anyways, there are many different versions of the High Priestess card. So anyways, as the name High Priestess implies, a priestess, or as the Popess, she refers to the divine feminine and the spiritual nature of the feminine, female spirituality. Okay? Now, how do you interpret the High Priestess in a reading? How do you interpret the card in a reading for divination? As with all the cards, the interpretation for divination will depend upon the context and the cards that are around it. So there are certain key words. Of course, if you look at her symbol, it more or less sums up what she represents. But certain key words are hidden knowledge, science, intuition, dreams, hidden knowledge. Okay? So these are some certain ideas that the High Priestess brings to mind. So as I said, the interpretation of the card in a reading will largely depend upon the context of the reading and the cards that are around it. So for example, she represents intuition, dreams, psychic ability. So if you get the High Priestess in a reading, it may be telling you to listen to your inner voice. Listen to your intuition, in other words. So listen to your intuition. What does your gut instinct tell you? If you look at her card in the Rider-Waite-Smith deck, you see that she sits in between two pillars. The two pillars, Jachin and Boaz, represent opposites, polarity. So you can interpret it as she sits in between two decisions. So if you're doing a reading because you're trying to make a decision, you can't decide, you're always weighing these two ideas and you just can't decide. The High Priestess represents intuition, dreams, psychic abilities. So this could be a message telling you, instead of just weighing these two, if you're not getting anywhere, what does your gut instinct tell you? What does your intuition say? So in that case, it would refer to listening to your intuition, dreams, things like that. Of course, she is a female, she is a High Priestess figure. So in a reading, she could represent spiritual development. Or maybe you should pay attention to your dreams, things like that. If she's around other really spiritual cards, such as the Hermit, things like that, the Hanged Man, then it could bring out more this aspect of it. If you're trying to make a decision and you do the reading, the context of the reading is making a decision, and especially if you get like judgment or something like that, like trying to make a decision, then it would bring out that aspect of it. So it could refer to, in a reading, to listening to your intuition, listening to your gut instinct. It could refer to spirituality. What are some other ways that this can be interpreted? She represents science and education. So let's say that you're wanting to go back to school and you get the High Priestess in a reading. In that case, it could be a very positive sign because she represents education and science. So that could be a very positive sign if you're thinking of going back to school. She represents a mysterious woman. This could represent a person, especially if you see court cards around it. So in a reading to do with romance, she could represent a mysterious woman maybe you're attracted to. Or maybe if you are a woman, then you could be this mysterious female figure. So, as I said, the exact interpretation depends on what the reading is about, so the context, and the cards that are around it. Okay? And of course, if the card is reversed, then it would bring out, it could bring out more negative aspects. Or instead of intuition, it could represent a lack of intuition. The High Priestess represents hidden knowledge, things going on beneath the surface. So one negative aspect of the High Priestess card could represent gossip, secrets, things going on behind the scenes, especially if you see a lot of court cards in the reading, which represent a group of people. And illegal, if you're asking the cards about legal advice or a court case. She could represent hidden evidence coming to the surface because she's the revealer of mysteries. So as you could see, the way that I teach it, any tarot card could mean a lot of things, depending on the context of the reading and the cards that are around it. But basically, at its most essential, I would normally interpret this card as intuition, listening to inner knowledge, listening to your gut instinct and your feelings. What does your intuition tell you? So that is just a basic rundown of the High Priestess card. Again, she could represent a mysterious woman. She could represent listening to your dreams. She could represent a mystical experience. And then there are other qualities that could come out: the education and the science aspect, the revealer of mysteries, secrets being made known, and all of that. So that is a basic rundown of the High Priestess card. Now, one book that I would really highly recommend to students of the esoteric nature of the tarot. So I talked a little bit about its everyday meaning, interpretation, and a reading. So now we will get into its everyday esoteric, and its deeper esoteric interpretation. But like I said, in a reading, usually it means listening to your intuition, psychic ability, dreams, things like that. Okay, now I highly recommend for students of the esoteric nature of tarot to read 777 and other Qabalistic writings of Aleister Crowley. Now, it's claimed that Crowley wrote this book from memory, 777. I'm not sure if that's the case, or if this may have been an earlier Golden Dawn document. I don't know. If it is from memory, I'm sure that he did learn most of this from the Golden Dawn. So this is a good book for Golden Dawn-based tarot. And you could see in this sort of the deeper dynamics behind the Rider-Waite deck. You see a lot of these correspondences in the BOTA deck, in the Thoth deck, different ones. So if you look on here, it's a list of tables. Okay, and what's interesting, not just the tarot, but this tells you the attributes that you can use to construct a ritual around pretty much anything. So line 13 ascribes the letter gimal, which means camel. It's ascribed to the moon. Okay, of course, it connects the sephirah on the tree of life from Kether down to Tiphareth. It's called the uniting intelligence on the names of the past from the Sefer Yetzirah. The king scale of color is the color blue. Silver is also ascribed to her in blue. So the color blue, she's connected to the moon, the uniting intelligence. And she, in Greek deity, she's connected to Hecate and Artemis, and to the Roman goddess Diana. And then if you wanted to construct a ritual, or if you're doing a path working with the High Priestess, then it even shows you here a list of plants connected with this basic energy. Almond, mugwort, hazel, moonwort, and ranunculus. Precious stones, moonstone, pearl, crystal. So these are stones, these are plants that are connected with the basic energy of the moon and the High Priestess card. And of course the moon astrologically governs the emotions, feelings, intuition, dreams, psychic ability, and all of that. Magical weapons, the bow and arrow connected to Artemis, and of course I'm on page 13 of 777, and interestingly enough, okay, gimal connects Kether to Tiphareth, but the bow and arrow is the symbol of Sagittarius, and the letter Samekh, which connects Yesod to Tiphareth. So the path from Kether to Tiphareth is gimal, the next one is Samekh, so the next path below it also connects to the bow and arrow. Perfumes. Menstrual blood. That doesn't sound like a very good perfume. Camphor, aloe, sweet virginal odors. Okay. Powers connected to this letter, gimal. Clairvoyance, divination by dreams. Like I said, the High Priestess card is connected to psychic ability and all of that. So, anyways, that's just about it. And that's it. So, I just wanted to point out that if you want to get into the esoteric nature of tarot, 777 is a very good book. And a lot of esoteric versions of tarot are based on these ideas. So whether Crowley originally wrote it himself, I'm sure he did, but probably a lot of the stuff from his memory came from while he was in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So Rider-Waite deck is built on this. A lot of esoteric Qabalistic tarot is based on similar Golden Dawn based traditions. So we're going to look at this in regard to the Qabalistic Tree of Life. Okay. The Qabalistic Tree of Life. About to get into some tarot. So, of course, in the Qabalah, the Tree of Life is a glyph, a symbol that represents the different qualities or forces that exist within our psyche. It is a map of our psyche, of states of consciousness, different aspects of our psyche. The Tree of Life is also a representation of the forces in the cosmos and different qualities perceived in the divine. So the Tree of Life is composed of 10 spheres or sephirot. The word sephirah is singular. Sephirah, the plural of which is sephirot. When you add ut at the end of a Hebrew word, it's the feminine plural. So sephirah is singular, sephirot is plural. So these 10 sephirot, these represent 10 qualities. And there's so many different ways to look at this symbol. This symbol evolved, well, there's different disputes on how it evolved. But Kabbalists meditate upon this symbol. Okay, so this is the Qabalistic Tree of Life. It's composed, can you see the whole thing? Yeah, okay. So you have 10 sephirot and 22 paths that connect the sephirot. Okay, now each one of the 22 paths, so before you really get into the 22 paths ascribed to the major arcana, it's important to first of all understand the 10 sephirot, which are connected to the minor arcana or lesser mysteries of tarot. And I really need to do some videos on the minor arcana or lesser mysteries, which would basically be a rundown of the 10 sephirot in the four Kabbalistic worlds of Atzilut, Beriah, Yetzirah, and Asiya. So before you really get into the 22 paths, it's important to understand the 10 sephirot. So what are the paths? The paths that connect the 10 sephirot represent relationships. So if you want to understand a path, basically you understand these two sephirot, and the path that connects them has qualities of both. What do these two sephirot have in common? Okay, for example, Aleph connects Kether to Chokhmah. And so Aleph has attributes of both. It is both transcendent and a rush of energy. And Aleph also tells how you go from one stage to the next. It tells how you go from Kether to Tiphareth. To Chokhmah, and vice versa. The letter Beit connects Kether to Binah. So it is the connecting link between Kether and Binah. And it's also how you go from one to the other. Now, the High Priestess is ascribed to the letter gimal. And gimal connects Kether to Tiphareth. This path right here that connects Kether to Tiphareth. This path is the letter gimal and ascribed to the High Priestess. Okay? So the High Priestess in the Qabalah connects Kether to Tiphareth. And that's what she represents. Okay? And we'll get a little bit deeper into that. As a path on the tree of life, she connects Kether to Tiphareth. So I'll do a bigger one here. Okay. These are the supernals. Okay. Alright, anyways, this is Kether. This is Binah. This is Chokhmah. Now, gimal connects. Here, I'll draw the bottom of Tiphareth here. So, this path right here that connects Kether to Tiphareth is the path of gimal. Now, in the Qabalah, this crosses what is known as the abyss. The abyss. The abyss is the dividing line or screening curtain that separates the unknowable, divine aspect, the unknowable, all transcendent aspect of reality from the phenomenal, everyday world of the senses. So, the screening curtain of the abyss in the Qabalah called Paroket divides divine consciousness from everyday human consciousness. Okay, this is called the abyss in the Qabalah. And the High Priestess crosses the abyss. It's interesting that the letter gimal means camel. And a camel crosses the desert. In the same way, the High Priestess crosses the abyss. The abyss that separates man from the divine. Or the abyss that separates our everyday consciousness from super consciousness. And it's interesting because the High Priestess, sorry, I know I'm facing the other direction. I'm trying to redraw this. But it's interesting because the High Priestess is a message from super consciousness. Okay? It is a communication from super consciousness. So on the tree of life, this dividing line right here across cuts off the supernal triad from the 7 lower sephirot. The supernals represent the transcendent aspect of the divine, or what is beyond what we can know. In the Qabbalah, Kether is all transcendent. It's beyond knowledge. All things spring from it. Chokhmah and Binah represent aspects of the divine mind. And these 6 sephirot from Chesed down to Yesod represent the pattern of creation. This is the world of Yetzirah. These are the 6 days of creation, which are all revealed in the realm of Malkut. So Kether represents, within man, Kether represents superconsciousness. It's above intellect. It's above anything that we could know. It is the divine aspect of things. And Tiphareth is right here as part of the the world of form. So the High Priestess represents knowledge coming across the veil. It is knowledge coming from across the veil, from superconsciousness. So when you get a spark of an inspiration or an insight or a gut instinct just hits you, this represents direct knowing, direct intuition that crosses the veil from man and the divine. As you can see, the High Priestess, I printed this off for the video, she sits in between 2 pillars, Yakin and Boaz. That's these 2 pillars on the tree of life. And as you can see, there's Kether, Chokhmah, Binah, Chesed, Gevurah, Netzachod, right there on the tree of life. Behind her is a curtain. Behind her is a screening curtain. Okay? Now, in Judaism, in the synagogue, there is a curtain that screens off the Torah scrolls from the rest of the shul. And this is called paroket. And it represents the screening curtain that screened off the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple, in King Solomon's temple. And King Solomon's temple, the Holy of Holies, had a screening curtain called paroket. It divided the Holy of Holies from the rest of the temple. In the same way, the veil behind the High Priestess is paroket. It divides the phenomenal from the transcendent. So the High Priestess refers to hidden knowledge that comes across the abyss. It comes from the transcendent superconsciousness to the realm of Kether, or the Ruach. Okay? So this represents when you get a gut instinct or intuition or dreams or psychic ability, that these are things, this is knowledge that crosses the veil. It transcends your everyday consciousness. Okay? Now, so it's interesting. And one more thing I'll say about this is that the curtain behind the High Priestess, there is a lot of sexual symbolism in the Qabbalah. The veil behind the curtain also represents the hymen. Okay? The hymen. It is the screening curtain which you have to cross to get to the Holy of Holies, which is the Ark. Okay? So the screening curtain represents the hymen. It shows that she is Virgo intacta. Virgo intacta. You have to pierce the veil, okay, to enter the hidden tabernacle. Now, going along with crossing the abyss, Okay, crossing the abyss. The Hebrew letter gimal means camel. The word gimal means camel, and a camel crosses the desert. Now, the letter gimal, I guess first I'll draw a more like fancy way. Okay, that's a more fancy way, as you'll see like in your typical like magical script. As you can see, it's a letter Vav with a Yud. It's the image of someone standing with one foot out, like walking. Okay, that's the fancy schmancy way of writing it. Now, if you're just writing with a pencil or whatever, then it's typically just drawn with 2 lines. Well, that's 2. Okay, there's 1 line, and then 1 out. Okay, so that's how you would typically write the Hebrew letter gimal, just like that. So as you can see, it's the image of someone standing with 1 foot out. So it's the hieroglyph of someone walking. Okay, and the Hebrew word for walk is ratz, which is tied to the word ratzon, which means will. But anyway, that's another matter. And the letter gimal means camel. And of course, a camel crosses a desert, crosses an abyss. So you get this idea of travel, movement. Okay. So there is so much more to talk about in regards to the esoteric symbolism of the High Priestess. A whole lot more to talk about. But today, I think I would just focus on the letter gimal connecting Tiphareth to Kether. Okay, crossing the veil. So basically, when you get that insight, a direct knowing, an intuition, prophetic dreams, that these are, I guess you could say, super consciousness coming through. Okay, so you get that direct insight. So, what else? I made a past video where I really think I did a better job. I was smoking back then. I had quit. So, I was planning on doing a new video. If you look at the symbolism, she sits in between 2 pillars. And again, the curtain connects the conscious and subconscious. Her crown is a triple moon symbol, and it connects Kether to Tiphareth, represented by the cross. Okay, she represents hidden knowledge coming to the surface, intuition, dreams. Okay, she has a book of hidden knowledge, which is partially veiled by her robe. And her robe's turned into water, which is a symbol of the astral light of Eliphas Levi, the astral light, okay, the basis of matter. And of course she sits on the cubic stone, which represents manifestation and Malkut. Okay, and that's just a basic rundown of the High Priestess. So I plan to go through each of the cards of the major arcana or greater mysteries, and talk about the different paths. And there are many different ways to look at it. I'm not using any one perspective, but I'm trying to blend different ways of looking at it together. And I'm trying to look at this primarily from a Qabalistic interpretation. So that's it. Anyways, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time. Have a great day, everyone. Oh, and new videos come out every Saturday morning. Thank you.